So that's one. Chloe says Flowlity. And what is the best supply chain optimization software? All right. That one seems a little bit easier since I'm in software and I understand that like idea a bit more cleanly. All right. So we'll revisit Nama. But I'm gonna start with Flowlity. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. So yeah, let's start here, and I will share with y'all my screen on how I would approach AEO for Flowlity. Flowlity. All right, so we have Flowlity here. Chloe asks, basically supply chain optimization software would be the overall like topic. Supply chain optimization would be probably the topic category, software being, closer to the end solution that the user is likely caring about. When we start with an AEO workflow, I don't know if y'all have seen the workshop presentation that I made on our AEO workbook workflow at Clearscope, but it is here. I'll share this with y'all in the chat if you haven't seen this like this. And essentially what we're going to cover is the overall arching steps from an AEO perspective on how I would go about understanding, researching, and building a content strategy and, thinking through some of the off-page ideas. So number one starts with topic research. And when we're looking at topic research, what we want to understand is, what does your existing brand and topic authority look like? Usually, I'll just ask AI for that. We want to then see whether you have content gaps within the core topics that you care about and identifying new topics on your own. So first off, where it starts pretty simply, is that I can go to Gemini and I can say, okay, for this brand, Flowlity, like this, what are the core topics that you associate with this brand? Like this, please return only the topics, or else Gemini likes to talk a lot about, why it chose what it chose. All right, so you can see here that Gemini has given us a good understanding of what the core topics it believes are associated with Flowlity. So all of these are really good. Seems like you have an existing brand presence that's fairly strong across, a lot of the different supply chain concepts that you have. So I think that that's pretty interesting. Where I would go next, because you're specifically wanting to own the topic of supply chain optimization, is that I'd probably look at, again, we're trying to understand just overall baseline of things here. And so I would probably also look at, again, this is now Google's like Gemini Studio, and I would say, okay, if I searched, right, the latest Gemini model, which is, Gemini, I think three flash preview, grounding with search, right? What would happen if I would search what are the best supply chain optimization softwares like this? So we would want to kind of get a sense to understand, okay, is Flowlity showing up? Is it not showing up? And when the model does its reasoning and its research, what is it thinking about and looking at? So over here, you can see here, we ran the prompt, what are the best supply chain optimization softwares? I ran it because I feel like there is a very strong footprint that Gemini appears to link to Flowlity so far. And then you can see here the added benefit of looking at the AI Studio response rather than the Gemini, like common user experience, is that you can actually dive deeper into how it's thinking and get insights into what it's searching for. which we'll cover in just a second as to why that's important. But okay, so analyzing it, identifying top tier supply for 2026. My strategy involves searching for industry reports and reviews from sources like Gartner, G2, and Capterra. So that's pretty interesting. I'm just going to write that down, like off-page considerations, right? G2, Gartner, Capterra. Clearly, the model, as it says, is looking at sentiment reviews from these different things. Several top listed ranks from Gartner are proving fruitful. So that's an added benefit there. Now, categorizing the software based on industry focus, company size, and core feature sets. That I think is also really interesting. So we're just now like thinking about product and use case, right? So industry focus, company size, core feature sets, right? That's clearly what it wants, niche specialists and their applicability to end users, excel in AI-powered forecasting, digital twins, real-time visibility. So that's also really good and interesting to know. So I'll write that down. Concluded my recommendations. Okay. So you can see here dominated by AI native, digital twin, and then we get SAP, IBP, Oracle Fusion, Kinaxis Maestro, so on and so forth. But I don't think we see Flowity, right? That's kind of the here. Yes, no Flowity. Okay. So no Flowity, but interesting stuff that we saw within the reasoning. And you'll see here, other interesting stuff to pay attention to is the Google search suggestions. So these are what in SEO speak or AEO speak is what we're calling query fan out. Query fan out refers to the fact that models, when performing answers for users, will likely ground with Google search. And that's because the knowledge cutoff or training data associated with models is usually out of date. Therefore, models need to search to understand whether or not there are new topics, concepts, trends, whatever, to think about before responding to the end user. The query fan out then gives us, well, all of these different searches as things that the model felt necessary to search for to basically provide the best possible answer. You'll see here what's very interesting just looking at these is that G2, right, is specifically called out. So is Gartner right over here. That's also specifically called out. So those were already, again, mentioned in the reasoning, and we captured that there. Obviously, we're not going to be able to influence either of these two because they're branded to the software category things. So we'll want to stick to the query fanouts we can actually potentially influence like this. All right, like this. All right, so here, right, I've now jotted down, I'm going to delete the G2 and the Gartner like stuff. So I've now jotted down essentially a list of starting topics that Gemini thinks about your brand. I've looked then at how Gemini's thought about the particular topic that you want to be mentioned in or see more visibility in. And then I've documented the searches that the model has performed to arrive at the response that it is currently getting back. I have done all of this manually, and I want to point out a couple of different things. Number one is we're doing a lot of research at Clearscope to basically understand how much variance there is within the response and the reasoning and the searches and the sources that are showing up within each one of these different samples. So pointing out a key problem here, I'll just share, some of our findings here. Number one, a big problem with just looking at one run of what we just did is that there are a variety of probabilistic outcomes that happens when you run a response with AI. That's just the nature of how AI works. And I don't know if this one's probably the best one here. So you can see here what this is looking at is the idea to say when we ran the same prompt 100 times against the same model, what we saw from a web search frequency over time is that not all of the recommendations that we jotted down over here with the query fan out are going to be consistent across many different runs. So our control ran the same prompt against Gemini 100 times. And then what we did is we took snapshots over the last week to then verify, okay, every day, if we ran this 10 to 20 times, essentially how much deviation away from the control set are we going to get? All of that is to say that with regards to the query fan out, what you want to be mindful of is the sampling required to get to the correct probability of search frequency that happens with the model. At Clearscope, we're actively working on figuring this out for you, and it's actually part of our not yet live, but will become part of how our track topics work. So essentially, this out-of-the-box work that we just did here can be augmented, made easier by just going to Clearscope. In this particular case, I can then come here and drop the prompt that I want. What are the best supply chain optimization softwares like this? And then you can see here what we'll go do is we'll hit both GPT and Gemini with the prompt, what are the best supply chain optimization softwares? We'll give you the overall response and brand mentions and whether your domain was cited right over here. So you can then very quickly see the different web searches and responses that these models are getting back. So just a way to get you faster to the same research that we had to conclude over here. Also, I just want to point out here that the web searches used in this particular prompt, as you can see, are different. Every single time you run these, you're going to see different possibilities showing up. And that's just the nature of how AI works. So again, I jotted down at least the like G2 and Gartner ones. I can rerun this like this. And I bet you that we're going to see some variance in both the thinking and the overall response and the overall searches that are going to show up below like this, right? We didn't see a SAP IBP versus Oracle versus Blue Yonder versus Coupa versus Kinaxis, right? We had this, but it felt like it merged Gartner and G2 together in this one. And then, some of these other ones look about the same. Let me see. Emerging trends. Yeah, we didn't have the emerging trends over here, and we definitely didn't have this crazy comparison list over here like this. So again, just wanting to point out that the best way to accomplish the understanding of what queries you actually want to target is going to be through doing a lot of sampling like this. And the Clearscope prompt tracking that we're working on is going to give you this as the target to say, okay, if you want to go after, this particular prompt, these were all the web searches that were used within a control set. And you get then insight into how to target the right topics and articles that are going to have the highest impact on the model. So again, back to the manual state. If you want to do this, I would recommend rewriting this probably 10 times to just get a broad sense of, okay, what are the different query fanouts that are happening? And more importantly, which ones appear to be repetitive or higher frequency, right? So again, different. Now we have the best AI supply chain software 2026, which is kind of this, but I mean, it has AI in it instead, right? So slightly different. Best AI supply chain software. Okay, it's basically the same. Leading transportation management systems. Huh. I mean, that makes sense, right? Transportation management, I guess, is another way to say supply chain. Just a different thing, but also quite interesting. Top warehouse management, again, another way to say supply chain. That's not supply chain, also quite interesting. Cool, right? So that's three runs. So you just keep doing this and writing this down until you got basically the comprehensive skill, the comprehensive, as comprehensive as you can get, doing it manually to get the query fanouts. All right. So where we are now in the overall process is still kind of within this idea of, okay, we know which topics that AI associates with your brand, and we now need to identify either content gaps that you might have within these query fanouts that are happening, and or new topics that you might need to create as a result of understanding, what the prompt ecosystem looks like. So we basically walk through this particular step where we looked at the prompt tracking, we looked at the web searches that we saw here, and we realized that AEO is the art and science of optimizing for AI, which is different than SEO, which is the art and science of optimizing for users. What, again, you can see here in the data that we're working on at Clearscope is that a highly frequently searched, the prompt is, how is AI used in SEO? A highly frequently searched concept within Gemini was AI applications in SEO at 61% frequency. But if we were looking at monthly search volume, which is user-led, we would probably go to targeting AI tools for SEO. Now, you might argue these are pretty synonymous in, like intent per se. But the big difference is that 1,000 people search for that, but the agent actually doesn't like searching for that as much for whatever reasons. It likes searching for this, followed by that, even though, again, the search volumes aren't that like important, which is why you have to do the sampling to then figure out, okay, from a frequency perspective, based off of the target topic and prompt that I want to own, what is actually being searched from the models themselves. All right. Now we are in creating content, right? So if we're talking about how to influence the AI model, there are really three distinct layers that matter. Number one is going to be training data. Number two is going to be grounding with search. And number three is going to be memory and context. So all models are trained on data. If we can enter that data set, then we are set up to help ourselves show up in the different models. The problem with training data is that it is slow, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it requires content, right? Like training data is just documents, whether it is documents on G2, Gartner, and Capterra, or documents on Flowlity, it's still documents. Grounding with search is then the practice of trying to intersect the model when it does its additional research or query fanout. So here we want to understand percent frequency of query fanout based on prompt like this. So we took, again, our best shot at a manual sampling of this. And we got to, these specific ideas like that. Lastly is going to just be memory and context, the fact that AI uses, past conversations, context to then augment their response to you. And this is very hard to know because we don't know how AI is using memory and context. We also don't know, how much it's used and what kind of conversations that user has had with their AI. So we can then forget about that If we then come back to this, then you'll kind of quickly see there is really only two ways that you can influence a model. And it is primarily by either creating your own content or influencing existing content that talks about your topic or brand. So we're going to look at the your content component because that one is completely in your control, right? You can create a product page, use case page on warehouse management systems. You could also create one on leading transportation management systems, right? Because these are basically synonyms. I'm guessing, again, I don't know the supply chain space that well, but they're like synonyms of use cases that your product could offer. So here is then where we want to look at the content considerations. Here, we'll look at primarily new versus refresh, right? So based off of the query fan out that we're seeing, you likely have some pages on Flowity that matches some of them, which again could use a content refresh, or you might be missing or having gaps within the topic. And that would then, require you to create some new content like this. So again, just some interesting observations because AI uses web searches and the web searches have no to low search volume, no to low competition. It does mean that the model is going to have to depend on different metrics compared to the traditional search engine optimization ecosystem. In SEO, over the last few years, everyone's been saying EEAT is super important. And that's because Google was found in the antitrust case to use user engagement signal to validate whether or not content being used or served in high rankings was good to end users. But because we're targeting, again, AI web searches, which back to this, don't actually get that much searches, then you have to really ask yourself, how is the model going to determine whether or not your piece of content is good, high quality, meeting user needs when no users are actually searching for it? That's an interesting question. We believe that then the models start to rely on this concept of topical authority and entity relevance. Here is just, again, some musings, some hypotheses that are floating around. So short queries split weight evenly across words, lawyers, and credentials. Embedding is half lawyer, half credential. Lawyer is a bit dominating. Adding synonyms but mentioned once or twice, it's diluted, but embedding is pulled towards intent. So for example, lawyer qualifications, credentials, licensing, certifications, experience gives 20% weights, right, across all of these different entities that are being mentioned. Therefore, the result is that different intent and angles are now surfaced in different content, which better matches the actual intent. Generic pages or chunks within them that mention those entities then score okay. And then, basically, if you have specialized content targeting, again, the entities in the correct way, then it wins. If you look at the query fan out, you will see that it is very long. At Clearscope, we've been calling this the long, long tail. And the assumption is that something like this is happening when AI performs research, right? It wants to look across the different use cases and possibilities, right, that it wants to present to the end user. And therefore, it performs long, long tail searches, which get very little search volume. So anyways, the end goal, and this is what we're seeing a lot of success with at Clearscope, is to then create quality content for AI rather than users, because the AI queries are a little bit funky, right? They're a little bit hallucinatory. So at Clearscope, that's been our bread and butter. But yeah, so quickly to then jump into this content flow, right? We have a new or a refresh. We have Flowlity, and we have an existing brand with some amount of uh, existing authority. So here, right, is where I would say, okay, well, let's try to then match, right, to see if there are any existing pages on the website that would do a good job answering the query fan out that the user has, not the user, the agent has for the prompt that we want to target, like this. So you see here, best AI-driven supply chain management software, leading AI-powered supply chain optimization tools. Best in 2026. Oh, this is collaboration. Okay, so there's at least a couple, and the AI-powered and AI-driven is a pretty good match over here. So this would then fall into the refresh, right? So we say refresh, and then this would target, this particular thing. It would be obviously best to know if, this was actually searched 5% of the time versus 60% of the time. Again, that insight will be in a Clearscope prompt tracker near you coming soon. And then, yeah, I'll just look at a couple of these other ones, like best end-to-end, just, nah, I mean, not end-to-end, best. Let's look at top warehouse management rankings like this. So we'll do this like this over here. Let's just do 2026 rankings. All right, same page that shows up, and it's top warehouse management systems. So I would say there's an opportunity here for you to create some new pages around probably these use cases if you serve these use cases. Again, I don't know the space that well. Same thing happens over here. So you could have new use case pages that target transportation management systems and warehouse management systems like this. Okay, so we have some new, some refresh, and then I just want to look at this last one, this comparison one. It's typical that people might have like this versus that pages, and I just want to see if you have anything here, which you don't. So that would be then another new page, maybe a comparison, and it would target, yeah, something like this. This is way too many though. Whoops. All right. Okay, cool. So we have then some work cut out for us. Number one, we'd want to refresh this existing page. And number two, we would want to create some new use case pages based off of, again, the query fan out that we've identified in the earlier steps. In Clearscope, how we would help you with that is that we would say, okay, let's do, like a comparison page, right? So we help you with the content creation process from start to finish, but not only that, we give you the exact relevant entities that the topic deserves to cover, right? Again, what the leading models appear to be doing is chaining together entities to get the right information that it wants to validate before giving the response to the end user. This is why in SEO speak, lots of leading SEOs are running around talking about chunking, cosine similarity, passage relevance. That's all a fancy way of saying, I'll just show you like here, what Google and AI models are doing is that they are looking at blocks of text, but when AI looks at it, it's very different than how humans look like it. AI looks at it like this, right? They say, okay, this block of text has Google in it, and Google is an organization. It talks about Mountain View Amphitheater, and that's an address. And, Sundar is a person, right? So it thinks about blocks of content not as, like meaning and passages and context like we think about it. It breaks it out into this understanding of entity relationships, which is also called the knowledge graph. All right, so at Clearscope, we're designed to basically help you figure out what those core entities are. This is why, our content production workflow is going to be superior to going to, say, a ChatGPT and being like, write me an SEO article on this, right? I mean, a lot of people are doing this in their workflows, but this is all just cookie cutter like content and entities that you're going to be getting back. At Clearscope, we look at the top 20, Google search results. We use fine-tuned models to extract the relevant entities that surround this particular search. And then we wrap the entire thing into a nice AI drafting experience that you can use to get a pretty comprehensive and nice piece of content done. Since all the data processing happens in real time, it may take a little bit of time. Okay, that just finished perfectly. Okay, so diving in just really quickly, we have an AI drafter here. You can use it. Again, the reasoning as to why it is much better than just cookie cutter outputs from your LLM of choice is that we interweave the actual search insights into this, right? You start by selecting an intent that the user is likely caring about understanding market landscape, comparing specific vendors directly. That makes sense. You can then, specify the type that again changes how your page works. If it were a new page on a use case like a transportation or management systems, you could go product. This one is a comparison, so we're going to go research. From here, one of the most important and overlooked steps is to give your piece of content a tone. So you can see here what we allow you to do is that we can go and take like existing content that you've produced and copy and paste it inside the draft. This will train the model on understanding your tone of voice, your writing style, like this. And then we go above and beyond, like it's a professional writing style. It looks at metaphor usage, tone of voice, sentence structures, rhetorical questions, humor, lack of humor. All of that gets turned into a style guide for the artificial intelligence. And then you get to select the title. And then from there, after we get the titles back, you'll get a nice interface to kind of think about which ones make sense for the, again, intent that you're looking to service. And then, yeah, it's just a little bit more involved than, what we just did here. But that involvement is what is going to get you the additional extra secret sauce and entities and subject matter expertise that is going to matter for these AI models moving forward. All right, so you can see here some suggested titles, right? SAP versus in comparative blah, right? You can like take these, you can regenerate some more if you like, but we'll just go with the standard. This is maybe the top three in the space like that. Lastly, before getting the full article, you have options to edit the outline that we're getting back. You can also see that we've taken in your tone of voice, which I assume is probably very professional, very enterprise, that kind of stuff. And it gives you the detailed outline like this. Here is where we can then, intersect what we might want before, hitting this off to be sent. But we might want to add, Flowlity as one of the like options, right, in this overall set. So we're in methodology, detailed use. We'd probably add this honestly, like near the bottom of this one, if we were going to add a section on Flowlity like this, like this, and then it's like, when to consider Flowlity. All right. And then you create the draft. So again, a slightly more involved process than going to your favorite, editor or running, some kind of draft prompting, whatever ecosystem that you have on your end. But the end result is going to show in that the piece of content is more infused with search entities, and some AI response concepts that you're going to see over here on the right. So that would be we're almost done with the new content workflow. And then I'll just say that the refresh looks very similar, except instead of creating a brand new page like what we're doing with this comparison stuff, what you're doing is that you are updating an existing page using pretty much more or less the same like workflow. So here you have a piece of content that, again, we built for you using the different steps that we went through. You can see here, if you've never been exposed to Clearscope, we do help you grade and evaluate your content on the presence of entities being needed or included within your piece of content. This piece of content currently could score better. It's an A- because it does not talk about concepts like kinaxis or workflows or demand forecasting. So you can either add these in manually, like this, or very soon, we are going to give you the ability to just boost your content grade where we will find out places to add those unused terms for you. So I can click make changes, and then you can see here we've used those. The content grade has gone up, and we can just make sure that each one of the entities that we're adding in makes sense to us and boosts the overall content grade. So I'd boost this, probably to A plus or there is an A plus plus. That just means, you've used pretty much almost all of the entities like necessary. So we then have the completed piece of content. From here, you publish, right? Again, if we're thinking about a content refresh, it looks basically the same in Clearscope. If you had an existing piece of content, like ignore the keto diet, but you could go here and say optimize existing content, and that's where you could copy and paste in a blog post. And then we would basically drop you into the editor experience, except instead of creating the content, we'll just take your existing content that you have. So from there, you publish, or republish, right? Just depending on if it was new content or refresh content like that. And then lastly, you track over time. So AEO is like SEO, right? Just because you did it does not necessarily mean it's going to work immediately. These things take time. That's why prompt trackers like Clearscope like this will show you, how things are going over time. It will then show you, what are the mentions and citations that your brand is getting. And then the goal is to obviously improve the frequency of mentions and citations over time. So that would be the on page. I mean, this one for off page, this one's very specific, but I would then also really think hard about your presence. So if I do Flowlity G2 like this, there's only 5 here. That could be better. Capterra like this. I guess. Oh, yes. That's the G2. Okay, so you're not on Capterra. I'll probably get on Capterra Gartner, right? Like this. And that would also then improve your ability to influence these two things, right? Obviously, what we're trying to find is A, the content that it already believes to be valuable surrounding the topic, whether it is your content or other people's content. And then B, trying to create more content to then introduce to the agent while it's performing research to then influence the overall response. All right, I'll pause there. No one has had any questions. So questions, comments, thoughts, lay it on me. Jim, glad you found it helpful. Chloe, I'm glad you submitted this because we could cover it for you. Any questions, thoughts? I'm happy to move on and dive into the other example that we had pitched, or I can, hey Bill, glad to see you here. Or I can, yeah, answer questions and thoughts on what people want. Okie dokie. And if you do have questions, you can just drop them into the Q&A in a bit. Okay, Chloe says, is there an equivalent of Google AI Studio but for GPT? I love this question because I have a more interesting update and take for you. We've done, again, a lot of research. Clearscope, Matt, our COO, Liz, our marketing person. We've all looked at the data, and we are coming to this idea that GPT is not that influenceable and also perhaps not worth pursuing. It's a bit of a contrarian take. But okay, number one, again, when we ran all of these prompts like 2,000 times, ChatGPT only searched 45% of the time. And it was primarily for these two intents, the fresh one and the research, like this. When it searched, this is the most interesting component, it only searched for unique queries. It was literally for like latest SEO trends. It was, I think, like latest SEO trends 2024. Oops. It's pretty yeah, not great. So essentially what that illustrates to us is that, and for informational and commercial, it did not search. So when GPT or any AI model does not search, what that means is that it's purely providing the response based off of training data. So right back to this, training data is slow, and yes, it requires content. All of the things that we just listed in terms of optimizing for Gemini basically benefits optimizing for ChatGPT. So my current take is that by optimizing for Gemini, you're actually optimizing for what the other models are likely going to do. And Gemini gives, again, the most flavorful long tail of searches because, well, it is Google. And then, the other thought that I have is that oops, Gemini is, um, sorry, I just realized I was not sharing my screen. All right, here. So yes, so 45% of the time, right, that's when ChatGPT was searching. And then Gemini to ChatGPT, you can see here, there's only 4 unique queries. So anyways, optimize for Gemini. Don't worry too much about ChatGPT. In the future, I believe it is very likely that Gemini just takes the generalized AI model like space pretty convincingly. All right, Jim says, how much do you charge to do the same thing from other business? Let's see, what is your business and can we do it really quickly? How can I grow my podiatry clinic marketing agency with Clearscope? Okay, all right. I have one more question and then I will see if I can jump into the Q&A. Okay, Jody says this has been so good. Thanks, Jody. All right. All right, I have 15 minutes. I'm gonna quickly do I'm gonna try to do both of yours. I know podiatry growth came first, so let's take a look at that. All right, Jim. So tell me, what's the topic? Like, what's the ideal outcome is when somebody types into Gemini or ChatGPT X, where do you want your business to show up? Podiatry marketing agency. Okay, cool. Like this. All right, so if I go to Gemini like this, and I say, okay, what are the best podiatry marketing agencies like this? Then let's see what I get back. I'll pull this out. Pull, plop, loop. All right. And then let's go back to this. Podiatry growth is what we want to go after like this. Let's pull up an AI studio like that. Okay, let's see, top practices, AAPM, parent anatomy, content connection, best for SEO and social. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, okay, that's the rec. Cardinal digital marketing, runner agency, office site. That's interesting. All right, I'm just gonna point out here that when I looked at this, that it was split by like niche, I suppose, right? Coaching and strategy, right? Like this, uh, SEO and social content like that, multi-location, best for digital patient acquisition. I guess it's like lead gen. Best for turnkey or design. Yeah, something like this. Cool. All right, so we did that. Now I'll also go ahead and run the prompt in Clearscope. So I again want to get some more data points in terms of all right, so what are the best podiatry marketing agencies? And then I want to get the query fan out and stuff that I see over here. And then lastly, what I will do is I will run this in AI Studio so that I can get, again, some more data on what the models are thinking. It's very likely going to be, so it started with the search for that, and then full service, specialized agencies with unique value propositions, node hit specific, as local SEO focus. Look at that. It's showing up already. So there you go. Mhm. All right. So it basically does it again, right? Like content, lead tracking, there's some, that's basically leads. Digital standout, best big name office site. If I'm all right. So it considered you, but it did not recommend you. Let's see here. Where was it? Oh, it's one. All right. This. Okay. It considered you. That's interesting. Um, okay, so yeah, let's look at the, the query fan out. Of course, tons of entities. I'll just say here, it looks like very clearly to me that it cares about Clutch, right? That's the agency review site, Clutch. It cares about some comparisons, SEO and PPC. Yeah, okay, Clutch, SEO and PPC in this particular run, I think stand out to me there. And then I would run this again. I'll run this again, and I'll check Clearscope and see what this ones were. So best, highly rated, top proprietary. All right, so it's about the standard stuff over there. Let's see what the AI Studio has to say again. Healthcare top, right? Okay, so this one's again kind of more of that high level, top level stuff here. Okay, so we have basically the niches. We have Clutch is probably a good off-page candidate for you to, improve your sentiment, reviews, ratings. And then we have all of these different use cases. And then we have the head, best podiatry, marketing stuff. All right. So now going back to your site like this, I'm sure you probably have some of these pages already. Best podiatry marketing agency. This is just a stock head term like this, but we're double checking. And I guess you don't. So anyways, that's again, some people like it, some people don't like it, but I do think generally when it comes to these best type things, agents really like searching for it. I would also go and look at then the use cases, right? So podiatry for SEO. Let me see if you have that. You do? Well, that's your homepage. And then let's take a look at PPC. PPC. You don't? Yeah. So I think that you have a lot of service use case pages that you probably should create, like lead gen. I know the concept of marketing is for lead gen, but you'd be surprised what you need to spell out for agents. Lead gen, I might have one for PPC, multi-location. Anyways, I think you're missing a ton of these, especially just based off of, right, how the model is trying to categorize each one of these. So I think you have a lot of new service use case pages that you need to produce. And again, this matters because you want podiatry growth to be co-occurring as a brand amongst concepts or entities like lead gen podiatry marketing agency and PPC and multi-location. And you're not making that linkage super clear. When you do, then describe your business on Google My Business, Clutch, so on and so forth. Call these out as well, because again, you want to make the entities co-occur. All right, I'm going to check the chat and the questions. Let's see, that's helpful. Transactional, solo, right? Okay, and then one Q&A. Any tips for AI visibility for a law school in NYC? Well, you'd have to tell me which one, but I don't think we're going to have time for that. So I'm going to do the last one that was brought up in chat, which is NAM ADR. I see. National Arbitration and Mediation. Yes. Okay. So looking to expand ADR dash legal space. Sarah, if you're still around, what would be the prompt? Like if I type X into Gemini, what do you want NAM to be mentioned for? Probably best ADR providers? Question mark. Yeah, what is the best ADR service? Okay, perfect. So again, same playbook, gonna run the thing through Clearscope. This also establishes a way for us to track whether or not our content efforts are being rewarded or punished. I'll run this again in a new chat with Gemini, and I will run this with a new chat in AI Studio, like that. All right, so sample set of 3 over there, and then we'll take a look at the query fan out. All right, what is the best ADR service? Let's take a look at this. So this one, that one's interesting. It like went for an informational search because ADR probably could mean a variety of different things. But interesting that it decided to do that. Again, we'd have to sample it a lot of different times. This one obviously makes sense. It's alternative dispute resolution service. Let's take a look at this. Again, what is ADR service definition? Again, very interesting. Um, Automated dialogue replacement. So that's different. Yeah, that's why it has to search that. I think this is probably a disambiguated concept. I will assume, just since you said legal, that you're not a dialogue software thing, but you're more of an alternative dispute resolution service. So actually, I would then say we need to do this all again because ADR is not 100%. So again, back to this, doing it all again, making it more specific. So there's no disambiguation. We can then get closer to what matters. So doing all of these steps all over again. Hmm, right. So this is the informational, right? I thought we were going commercial, but yeah, I think this is still interesting. So what is it like this? And yeah, it's just an informational piece of content. Let me go back to the chat real quick. Oh, what is the best? I forgot. Sorry. I messed this up. What is the best? I'm like, this is turned informational. All right, I gotta run it all again. All right, one more time. And then we're up for the hour like this. So this, and then this. Okay, all right. Let's look at this again. AAA, not the travel one. Jams and NAM. So yeah, I mean, it looks like you already mentioned. Um, what is your question then? I mean, do you want me to go through and, kind of give you insights into how to strengthen this? Let's just look at this. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. There's like a UK international. Seems like CEDR might be like one of the big 3 competitors that you have. Yeah. Well, that's where, well, ADO. Yeah, that's where sampling honestly does matter quite a bit here, right? I just ran this once in Gemini, and in this Gemini, I don't know if NAM is mentioned. Um, no, it is not. And then in this one for the still writing. All right. But yeah, so again, this is where prominent sampling over time matters. Um, yeah, you'd want to do it frequently to then get an understanding of, okay, how frequently are you doing it? And I'll just point out that it's going to be a very similar workflow to, what we just discussed. The interesting things that pop up to me is maybe business and commercial cases, as like a niche or a use case, right? Business, commercial cases. That's kind of interesting. Globally is kind of interesting. Are you worldwide, global, worldwide, global is like a consideration. This like US, UK is like also very interesting. Like why is US and UK like specifically called out? And then a, comparison is also, interesting. And then we would run it at least a few more times to see, we'd also look at this includes key regions. Yeah. So the regions component, I think, is probably the most interesting aspect of this particular thought experiment compared to the other ones that we've just done. Yeah. And then, all right. Yeah, so US, UK, Europe then came out. Wow, what is that? That's crazy. Anyways, so yeah, you can see each time it does pull differently over and over and over again. And the important thing is to understand the frequency of those being pulled. And then we can then start to map all the different use cases and searches from a frequency perspective back to your content. Do you have content existing that you should refresh? Do you have holes? Should you make some new content? And then you track it over time, just realizing that again, this stuff is more of a probability and a frequency rather than a absolute this shows or this does not show. Eddie asks, do you offer a trial period for your AI studio? I think if you're talking about Clearscope's like AI studio, you can check out our free trial over here. We do have a 2 week long free trial. Um, Jim asks, how do you get those query fanouts to show up in Google AI Studio? That's just part of how AI Studio works. When you go to the playground, if you're on the latest models, Gemini 3 Flash, it will by default say grounding with Google search, and then you will be able to find that. And then Jody asks, is there always a direct correlation between agent frequency and user intent? Agent frequency. So just so that I'm on the same page about what you're asking here, agent frequency, I think what you're referring to is, this idea, right? Where for the prompt, how is AI used in SEO? The agent decides to search primarily 60.8%. If then I'm reading your question correctly with user intent, I guess the answer is no. Like there's a loose correlation. I recognize that AI tools for SEO and AI applications in SEO are like pretty much the same. Therefore, this actually does sort of qualify to be, the top thing. But if you look at some of the other studies that we've done, I guess what is AEO does synonymize with that. So that one would be on at the top. Same with this. So I guess when you look at it from an intent perspective, what is this one? Future of SEO, latest SEO trends 2024. Who would have thought that that would be the web search frequency that was preferred the most by agents? Um, so a bit of a correlation, right? But like for this one, most affordable, and then the more user-led one is free. A bit of a correlation, but also a bit of not a correlation, if you will. All right. Well, I appreciated y'all coming in here, hanging out, jamming on some AEO stuff. I hope you enjoyed the session and yeah, keep us posted on how things go. I did drop a link for a 2 week free trial with Clearscope if you want to check out our query fan out mechanism, check out, how Clearscope can help with your drafting, definitely start there. And I hope everyone has an awesome rest of the year. See y'all.